Hello and welcome to the official podcast of PalateXposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
And some of those things have really stuck and changed the way a business has gone because they're getting attention. See, that's where it all started. It's like the power creates the attention gets the fame, but unless you can monetize it, what really have you accomplished?
Yeah.
You know, and the life of a restaurant is not 24 or 36 months.
No.
And I'm not going to do it right now, but if your listeners go to a computer and you look at the last 5 years of all of the, say people who have won awards or been on covers of magazines, how many of them still have their restaurants after 24 or 36 months? That's also what's wrong. So I think if you get if you get a bad review or a great review, I think that critic should be obligated to go back to that restaurant a year later and re-review it. Like, you should never review a restaurant once, good or bad, because it doesn't really give the reader justice. Because you've often visited in the first in this electronic age, you're asking what's wrong. The minute it's on Eater or on Facebook or Instagram, the critic's going to run to your restaurant if you're anybody.
Yeah.
On day one.
Yeah.
The minute you open the door now, there's no soft openings anymore.
Yeah. Unless
and only invite your friends and your family. Because the minute I'm not even talking about food critics, I'm talking about Yelp.
Yeah.
I have people coming in my restaurant on day 3. We open a new restaurant in Plano, a version of Knife, and people are writing Yelp reports while they're waiting online to get their car at the valet. That's an insane culture we have. That's why I did that article with Pete in the Times about complaining, and Pete was like, they're not writing reviews, they're complaining. They're venting their frustrations in life with these things instead of letting an expert do it.
Yeah.
So and I understand from his perspective, the more people that do it on the other side, the less relevant their career is going to be.
Yeah.
Because people are going to start listening to their friends. But I think there should be experts who lay down a path and a way to show us what the modern restaurant should be. That's their true profession. That's their obligation.
Yeah.
Not to give you 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars. Tell the story. This is what I think the modern restaurant should be, and if you accomplish this, then you can get 3 stars or a Michelin star or whatever it is. Like, all my friends in San Francisco have Michelin stars.
Yeah.
You know why? Because Michelin's in San Francisco, because French tourists go to the Bay Area and love Northern California because it reminds them of France.
Yeah.
Why don't we have Michelin stars everywhere? Because to me, if you don't have it in all 50 states, what does it mean? It's a competition in San Francisco and New York, and the rest of the country's like, where's my Michelin star? It means nothing at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that chef doesn't deserve it or wasn't a great restaurant.
Yeah.
It just loses its relevance because it doesn't apply to everybody. And this is what we've done in this business. We've segregated fame from good food.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
I think there's a certain lack of accountability. I mean, citizen reviewers, obviously they're obscured with their computer screens or phone screens, and they can never be held accountable for what they said about the restaurant that, in that moment, for whatever reason, didn't agree with them. Maybe they're just having a bad day.
Yeah.
And that's quite disturbing that they can have an impact, with just, a 3 or 4 sentence rant.
It's so weird how that works. And I think that's losing traction too.
Yeah.
Because it's like we live in a very fast society and people lose interest. Everyone's ADD these days.
Yeah.
So, and I think that some people are bold enough to want to experience it for themselves.
Yeah. And I think you correctly said, it's that boldness, it's that, desire to find the truth for yourself. It's empowering yourself.
Yeah.
So early in the conversation, you said that makes you really happy when people come to your restaurant and then they have a good experience. And that really stood out to me because you are accountable to that consumer that spends their hard-earned money. I don't care how wealthy they are, it's still, a lot of money.
They're paying the bill.
Yeah, so you're there to please them, not a random critic, whether it's a citizen critic or bona fide one. But you hold that value of people coming to your restaurant and having a great experience. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I think once you pay for something, you have the ability to talk about it,
Yeah.
And if you have an experience, you should just kind of keep your mouth shut, You know?
Yeah.
I heard, great. I heard. When's the last time you heard food? You know, I hear it when I put it in the pan. I hear it rattle around on the walk-in if it's alive. You know, but it's you have to experience it for yourself.
Yeah.
And it really is education, too, and it's very subjective. But that's why I think that food became so popular, and the reason why the taco and barbecue and more simple American or international foods are becoming prevalent. It's because they're more approachable to everybody as a mass.
Yeah.
And then you can monetize it. Because at the end of the day, everybody's doing this to make money.
Absolutely, and there's an honest and fair way of doing it and delivering value.
Yes.
For the money at any level. You can get value from a taco stand, and you can get value from quote-unquote Michelin-starred restaurant. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
It just depends who's behind cooking.
Exactly. No, and if you cut out the shortcuts, you're going to get value for your money. And now there's a lot of shortcuts out there. There's a lot of mediocrity.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be negative to talk about that, because there's a lot of great things too. I mean, those people are shoved in front of your face all day long. Does a chicken wing taste better when it's served to you on the end of the actual wing from the chicken with the feathers still on it? Because I have tremendous respect for creativity and all this innovation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I saw that in Noma for the first time, and now I see people emulating that. And I'm like, what do you do with that wing after you eat the actual protein on the end of it? Do you send it out to the dry cleaner? Does it go back to the dish pit? What's next? We're gonna, I don't even have an analogy for it. It's like, the extension of and I know it's very French, like going back to Carême, they would take animals apart and put them back together again. So I understand maybe the search for the interesting or the integrity or history of that.
Right.
But I just think it's totally absurd, to be honest with you. And I'm sure a lot of other people would just tell me oh, you're jealous, or you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm not eating that feathered thing. I'm eating the thing on the end of it, and it's freaking weird. I'm sorry. For me, that's an example of where we've just gone too far, I think.
So that kind of a quest for outdoing, the next, or achieving that unattainable, and something that's, becomes weird because you're trying.
You
so
can blame
hard.
Spain for that. I love all those chefs, but you can blame Spain for that, because they would sit around a table with 30 ingredients and say, what can we remove first, and then what goes together?
Yeah.
And then there was always this challenge, this emotional or intellectual challenging of what would work, what's new and different that's going to wow people. And Elbley is an extreme example of it, because they had a test kitchen. They were only open 6 months out of the year, and you see what happened. It never made a dime.
Really? I didn't actually know that.
I'm sure it made money along the way, but now it's an institute, and
Yeah.
they're all famous and extreme. I mean, it was mind-blowing. I think that's a unique thing. There's only one of those.
Yeah.
But it's that mentality that it grew from, because it was so
Yeah.
popular and so unattainable for most people to go that deep into experimental cooking.
Yeah, and it's so theatrical in a way.
Yes.
I haven't dined there, but from what I read, it's almost like experiential more than eating. So it's not really about food. It's about how it lands on you at any given moment because of the stimulation that you receive.
I think Alinea was like that first too when it opened.
Really?
All of that, challenging all the senses simultaneously, and then just creativity on top of amazing thought.
Yeah.
And then ingredients and stuff like that. But those are very unique, amazing places to go eat. And it's a team, and it's a place in history, and it's a lot of work, and people should really understand how hard those people work.
Yeah.
But then you obtain a certain level of notoriety, and what you do with it is really yours to do whatever you want with. Do you sell out? Do you just keep doing what you're doing? And then every restaurant has to be redeveloped over 5 or 6 years now, because it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
The public, you have to maintain, you have to keep moving forward. I mean, I have a restaurant that's been there for 5 years. It's the longest, except for the restaurant I had in the Hamptons, it's the longest restaurant I've had open.
Yeah.
And we're going to be there for at least another 5 years.
Yeah.
And now we're going to open in Orlando and the Ritz-Carlton, and we're going to open up in Laguna Beach. So I'm becoming more of a restaurateur and hiring younger chefs and mentoring them and designing concepts and doing all that kind of stuff. But it's constant evolution, this business.
Is there a common theme in all the dining establishments that you open? what is it about, like, foundationally for you when you open a restaurant, regardless of the type of cuisine? What are the staples? What are the values that you live by?
I approached it like we're trying to get 3 Michelin stars, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And I'm not talking about the bathroom or the fixtures or all those
Yeah.
other, trinkets of things that help you get all that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the discipline and the honesty to the food.
So
You know what I
food
mean?
honesty, what does that mean? Flesh it out for me.
It's that you have this beautiful ingredient or you have this challenging ingredient and you make something relevant out of it that someone's going to appreciate.
Okay.
That's all it really is. I mean, this is not rocket science.
What are some of the most challenging ingredients that you've worked with?
Oh, Crohn's. I'm sorry Mario's having a difficult time, but I had a restaurant in the West Village around the corner from Poe before he was the Mario Batali, and he would always make these obscure Italian things, and I'm sorry, cardoons, and they were like, it was like bitter celery to me, but he actually made it taste good. To this day, I've been trying to still, every once in a while I order some cardoons and I try to cook them and I wind up just throwing them all out. It's like you think you can cook anything, but I'm sure I could come up with something, but I didn't see any purpose in my restaurants or my cuisine to do that. But I just think that if you take time and do things right, nothing really should be challenging because, again, it's not rocket science. It's just developing the feel for it and giving it the respect and the time that it needs to really do it properly.
So some favorite proteins that you love to cook with?
I'm in love with the steak that we have now because it really is some of the best steak in the country. Aaron Franklin just wrote a steak book and he said I have the best steak in the country.
Cool.
In a way, relative to that older beef that they have in Spain, that Andrew Zimmern and Jose Andres speak about, that beefiness, that purity to it. So our steak, number one, and I'm a great seafood. I love seafood. I'm a seafood lover, and I like it right out of the water, right onto the plate. And that's what we're going to do in Laguna Beach. We're going to take everything from Baja to Alaska, and just one day raw, second day cooked, third day it's either cured or smoked, or we give it away. That kind of mentality of respect. But that's the way, when people tell you they don't like fish, it's because they've never had good fish.
Yeah.
A great piece of fresh fish is, you feel great when you consomme, a good cup of tea. You feel refreshed from those things. A good piece of fish, when you finish eating it after 2 hours after you're done with dinner, you feel good.
Yeah.
Eat 12, 14 ounces of red meat. Usually you fall asleep on the couch.
You sound like a food enthusiast as well as a chef. Do you like to eat?
Oh, I do, yeah. I mean, that's what it's all about for me. It's about tasting. And I teach my guys, I said, and girls, just make it taste good.
Yeah.
Don't get it so up in your head. I said, close your eyes. And if it tastes good, then serve it. If it doesn't taste right, don't serve it.
Close your eyes. So get out of your head in a way.
You have to get out of your head and really just make it about the food. And that's what I mean about we can talk about it and get very intellectual about it, but it really is just being honest. We've said that word several times in this conversation. The honesty is like, is it really good? Or are you just telling me it's good? Or I'm popular enough that you think it's good because it's me making it.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of popular people make me really bad food, either at events or at restaurants, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, please.
But I don't want to be negative, and there's a lot of amazing chefs out there, and there's more to come, and people do have the right to reinvent themselves and learn and grow and get better, and learn from their mistakes. That's how I came up.
You mentioned your friendship with Bourdain, which of course I felt like he was in a way a consciousness, almost a national treasure in that sense, because he said things the rest of us thought but didn't have the balls to say.
Yeah, it's so weird for me to talk about it because I had a different relationship with him.
Yeah.
We really were friends, and we were friends when nobody knew who either one of us were.
Yeah.
And we had these same conversations about politics, about food. I would cook for him, and he would tell me about his books and his experience and his family and so when I watched him on TV, he was the same guy.
Yeah.
And I was invited. He came to 44 and 10 Hell's Kitchen after I closed 13 Barrow Street. Knocked on the door and he said, "I got a show on the Food Network called Cook's Tour. I'm having a party at the Molotov. Come down to the subway station." And we did. We had a big party there, and he went on to be Bourdain. It was amazing to watch that transpire right before my very eyes, and The day he died, I don't think he even realized what an international brand he was. Because I woke up at 5:05 in the morning and Sarah told me that, she said Bourdain killed himself. And I was half asleep. And I looked at my phone and I had several hundred text messages on it. And then the networks started to call, because I was Jimmy Sears and all these quotes he's made up over the years. So he died, people started scrambling and going to the internet to see who could, other than Eric Repair, tell us something about Bourdain. So Scott Bryan and I were like, in the little square box on CNN and NBC and CBS. And I stopped doing it after a while because I just felt like, I said my piece on CNN and the BBC, and that was it, and we hadn't been close the last few years anyway, so it was just like there were other people that could probably be more relevant to the now Tony than the pre-famous Tony.
It's just fascinating to me that he seemed to have, from what I know and from what I've observed, a lot of emotional courage. I mean, he was able to and willing to say things the rest of us thought or didn't know about. He was kind of a almost galvanizing that energy that made us think critically, whether you agreed or disagreed. And that's why there's such a huge void, I think, in people's minds.
Yeah, and he was born to be a writer. He really was. That was his talent. That was his passion. How he dropped out of Vassar and became a cook, and for a short time did drugs and all that other stuff, was just kind of like, I guess, his journey from post-adolescence. But when I met him, he was always extremely articulate, charismatic, and very low key. And I think he had the combination of those three things create this cool persona. But I believe that he had a lot of fear. But that fear motivated him to do those bold things and to go to those places and be outspoken about stuff. And then the more juice he had, the more freedom he had. And at the end, he was so adulated and so renowned that he could say everything. I mean, I used to sit across the table like he sat with Obama in Vietnam. We did that every night. Or we'd go to the Red Lion in the West Village, and Dennis, our bartender friend, would be there, and like Pete Hamill would be drinking over there, and all these writers from the Post back in the day would be there, and Bourdain and I would drinking beer in sidecars and just talking about life and really important things. I mean, growing up in an Irish saloon in the bar business, guys sit around the bar and we talk about life all day long,
That is, I have to say, I have this mental image right now. That's so cool. He was obviously one of, maybe not influencers, but he was a friend. And were there other people that you would say really had a huge impact?
For the most part, Rick Moonen had a huge impact on my life as a chef, and not so much from a culinary side, but discipline, a professional kitchen. I had replaced Matt Accarino and Anthony Amoroso, who are two very, I think, two of the most young, talented chefs in America, especially Matt. What he does at SPQR is really, I think it's one of the best restaurants in the country. And so that inspired me, and Rick gave me that opportunity. And again, the seafood side of it and the hospitality, and not so much from Bourdain, because I was a big fan of Le Bernardin early on, but Eric kind of accepted me more as from an outsider's perspective, and the whole crew, because when RM Seafood closed in New York, some of our servers went to work at Le Bernardin. And Scott Bryan was a very close friend of mine, and Scott introduced Tony to Eric, theoretically. Because Scott had worked with Eric at Boulay in Tribeca, and then when Eric went to Le Bernardin, he had gotten a jam one day, and he called Scott up, and Scott went to work for him at Le Bernardin. So we were, through 6 degrees of separation, I got to...
The Kevin Bacon thing lives on.
I got to get, inside all of that. At one point, Eric would if there was a cook of mine that wanted to work in his kitchen, he was like, "Oh, just have him show up." I was like, I think 1 or 2 of them actually did that after I told them. Especially when we worked at RM, a couple of guys went to work and actually stayed there for like 6 months to a year. So just the way that restaurant's run, and the quality of the seafood and the creativity and everything is just, I think it is one of the best. It deserves
to be. Le Bernardin is kind of a shining.
To me, it's my favorite restaurant in the world. That Mugaritz.
It is your favorite restaurant in the world.
It is.
That's big words.
That Mugaritz and Arpège are really, and I haven't been to the new Arpège. I know chefs around town here, but I'm going to make a special trip to Paris to eat at the vegetarian arpège, because I watched the Mind of a Chef, or Chef's Table, I think, with Alan Pissard, and I was just really inspired how at his age, you know, and the restaurant was always very vegetal and farm driven, but that food was, you know, it's not every day that a chef can go into a restaurant and have his mind blown by other chefs.
Not imagine that's pretty special.
And those guys do it every time. Like every time I eat at Liberno, then I just walk out of there just going like, what just happened? You know, like, how do they do all that? You know, and they do quite a lot of numbers every night. They're not just doing 60 covers a night.
Yeah.
They're doing 300 covers on a Friday night, and they have pre and post theater business. You know, so it's not even foodies. It's people who have heard the reputation, want a special night out.
Yeah.
They take care of all that. It's just amazing.
Oh.
And Eric's probably one of the nicest people on the planet. I don't know him very well anymore because, you know, we've all kind of gone our own ways. But at a certain time, we always would talk. You know, and that's what I like, talking with chefs like that. Like really sitting down with people who are really invested in this business, and listening to their viewpoints and what they feel. You know, and they're good. Those are good people. You know, I don't know him very well, but I have tremendous respect for David Kinch as well, and also Michael from Providence in L.A.
Okay.
I always have problems with his last name. I think you pronounce it Chiamusti or something, but he's an amazing chef. I just ate at Providence the other day, and it's almost 10 years old, and it's still amazing seafood. Really, really. And you know, and I don't think there's enough really good seafood restaurants in this country.
I believe you're right.
I think you can count all the really good ones. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but you can count all the really good ones on one hand, and probably still have a finger or two left over.
Yeah. So from the consumer's point of view that you've highlighted early on, when someone is a foodie or considers themselves as such, what can they do to help themselves? Where should they go? How to
educate, read, you know, like read Escoffier, read, you know, go back that far, read the French Laundry Cookbook. You know, I think the only thing, and I love it because people are so enthusiastic and passionate and have made my life amazing.
Yeah.
But I think they just go off on tangents.
Yeah.
You know, the minute they get a taste of something, or they go to one food festival, they think they know everything.
Yeah.
You know, and wine's that way. You see that with wine. Like, people get crazy over wine.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of bad wine in the world too. You know, there's a lot of exceptional wine, but that's usually really expensive. You know, so I think people just need to educate themselves on what's not about what's good or what's bad. I think with the education, then you can discern for yourself through your own subjectivity what you like and what you don't like. And I think how that turns into success for a restaurant as a chef is that you get a whole bunch of those people to like you. And not you as a person, they like the experience of that you've created. And that's what a successful chef life is. You're only as good as your patrons.
So the onus is really on the consumer to clue themselves.
It is.
And then they would support and become patrons of the establishment that they align with.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out what you like.
Yeah.
In order to do that.
And you're allowed to. You don't have to follow what people tell you.
Yeah.
If you don't like octopus, don't eat it. If you like something else, then eat it. And if that's what you like, find out who does it the best. It could be a hamburger.
Yeah.
It could be bacon.
Yeah.
It could be a guy who grows a special orange.
Yeah.
You know?
Forget trendy or even Michelin stars, not to offend anybody,
No,
but that's not necessarily what's going to align with you.
Yeah.
It has its merit, but you need to know who you are.
And I think that's the important thing to do. Just because you say something that may be subjective or sound like some kind of criticism of anything, you should be allowed to have that conversation.
Yeah.
It's not that you're jealous or you don't have it or you're a mean person. This is what's missing, honest dialogue. This is why Josh Ozerski was a great friend of mine too. I mean, I had a dream. They didn't really like each other a lot, but my dream was to have Bourdain, Ozerski at the same time and be the moderator of the between the two of them, because I thought they were two of the most talented writers of our time.
Wow.
I thought Josh was the premier food writer in this country because he told the truth.
Yeah.
He was a character.
Yeah.
He didn't have much money. He was a finagler. He was a rascal. At times, an incorrigible heathen. But he was the best food writer, I think, of this modern time, you know.
Those are the cool ones.
Yeah.
Everything you described sounds like you just want to have a drink with them.
Yeah.
So it really resonates with me, and I hope people that are listening really kind of take a moment and ponder what it's like to connect to yourself through all the trials and tribulations. And certainly your life, again, is an exemplary of that. You've gone through so many ups and downs, and through that process, I know you've gotten to know yourself. And as I'm looking at you right now...
Oh, I know myself now.
Yes.
If I don't, I'm in a lot of trouble.
It just seems like you're more at peace with who you are, and you're very self-aware. So if you were to describe, like self-describe, what would that sound like?
It's an insecure little boy finally getting the hug that he needed from the restaurant public. And I think the snowball's actually growing. If you followed my career over the last few years, it's like people are actually paying attention to who I am. Not just that I was on Top Chef, or that I've had ups and downs, or that I was Bourdain and I ran around town together. They're respecting my viewpoint.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate compliment, I think, is that not only do you like my food, but you respect my opinion. You not necessarily have to agree with me, but you take the time to listen to it, because I've really been through 4 generations of this business.
Yeah.
And I've seen things that these kids will never see, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because the times change. And I'll miss things that they're going to create, because I'll be gone too.
Yeah. No, it's that continuum.
Yeah.
You so beautifully described. What do you look forward to the most?
Just opening some more restaurants, but doing it really, really well, and finding some young, talented people to help me do it. Yeah. That's what I live for every day now. That being a great dad. You know, my kids
I have a 13-month.
I have a 13-month-old. I have an 8-year-old, and it's really changed my life, my perspective, and everything I do is kind of with responsibility and for them.
Yeah.
But I approach that with the restaurant too, and it's made me more conscious of what's important in life.
Yeah.
And I think I was too myopic. You know, I wanted to be a famous chef. At certain times I wanted people to adulate me, and I needed it, and I didn't get it. Or it's like all these struggles that we have as creative people, or just in people in general. And I think you just have to keep plugging at it. You know, if you're pissing people off, you think about why you're doing it and stop doing it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people don't even say I'm sorry anymore when they shove you out of the way. We need to get back to some civics in school. You know, people don't have manners anymore. We're developing a really selfish world, and I think that's a shame, given all the opportunity and the wealth and the experience we have.
You know, there's so many teachable moments throughout this conversation, and it's so good to hear someone that has such a breadth and depth of life experience, and has seen so many iterations and almost generational, chefs that you've witnessed and worked with, to take the stance that's more philosophical and the mentorship and the paternal role, because I think we could all benefit from that. And it's not about necessarily, like you said, agreeing or disagreeing, but it's appreciating the fact that you have this really storied career that a lot of us can actually relate to if you kind of boil it down to human experience. Mm-hmm. And that's actually really cool, because it's not just about food. It's about how we relate to food and relate to ourselves through food.
Yeah, I'm like I joke about it, but that's what Bourdain and I used to do. Except he took it and made it a profession. I just kept it and struggled with it for the last 20 years. So, self-reflection is probably the most powerful thing in the world.
Yeah.
But how do you get everybody else to get on that bandwagon? Because they will, the short attention span, the social media, the TV, the fame, the money, the greed, the ego.
Yeah.
It takes life out of balance. And life is really about balance. Good food is all about balance.
So true. Well, hopefully people that listen to this conversation would be inspired to just take a moment and just self-reflect, just like you described.
Yeah.
And, get to know themselves enough to reach out for things that are more quality than quantity, and less pomp and circumstance and more insight.
The best advice I can give everybody is, like, in the first few moments when you wake up in the morning, just instead of jumping into the world or picking up your phone, just take 10 minutes and feel the weight of your body on the surface of the earth, and feel the gravity, feel what's good about yourself, feel what's bad about yourself. Get up, look in the mirror, and just try to be a better person. That's all you can do. If
everybody actually took the time and the trouble to do that, as a society, we'd be so much better off, because we sort of became human doings instead of human beings. What you described as a state of being, And it's such a beautiful sentiment to end this conversation.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much
Thank you
for
very
sitting
much.
down and for your candor and for the opportunity to get to know you.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I look forward to listening as well.
Yes, and I look forward to more conversations with you. It's been fascinating.
Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure featuring Ilona Thompson. We'll see you again next week.